Hey there! What's life giving you today? Welcome back to Moving with Meaning, the podcast where actions have meaning, words have meaning, and we open up the conversations to discover what's your next move. I'm your host, Crystal. This episode, we have a guest, and I'm just so excited to talk about the experience he's about to come at you with. But first, we need to set the theme, so let's go ahead and do that. The word of the day is endurance. This is the fortitude of outlasting the suffering of a demanding situation and not giving in. Everyone always believes that if things get rough and tough, they will be prepared to ride out the storm. In my guest case, I mean that literally. What do you think you would do if it came down to the it's us or them decision? Do you think your morals, values, and faith will hold true? Well, that's enough of me talking. How about we introduce our guest, and there's no one better to do that than himself. Jonathan, why don't you give the people a bit of background about yourself and what you are about to take us through today?
Sure. I'm married with 4 kids in my early 40s, and I live in a third world country, which means there's a lot of give and take. Everything's different. I lived for a long time, and where my story takes place is on a small tropical island that's known for just tourism. There's really nothing else going on. You very rarely see a 2-story building. 3-story buildings are very rare. So it's really that kind of environment. Most of the buildings are built out of bamboo, or like the roofs are built out of like leaves. And that's kind of where the house we were living in was built out of that. So that's really my experience as far as that. I've been someone who has always had a lot of negative experiences, I guess you'd say, with mental health. My parents tried a lot of therapy with me as a kid, but it was always like, oh, this person doesn't like normal stuff. So you have to give your therapist what they want, which is the good stuff. So I would just give more and more extreme stories. And I remember I was with this really well-known therapist, like the top therapist in town. And then we got to do a meeting with you and your mom. And I start telling this story. My mom looks at the therapist and she goes, are you an idiot? He's lying right now. And the therapist was so mad, she threw us out. My mom was like, why do you lie to her? You're not afraid of your dad. I was like, that's what she wants. You have to give people what they want. And that's really was my first big experience with therapists. So I haven't really taken therapists seriously. And I wasn't trying. Like, you don't start out lying. You just tell how you really feel. But they always make you accelerate it, right?
Oh, okay. I got you.
That was my experience. The therapist is like, no, but tell me how you really feel. I'm like, well, I kind of, I don't always see my dad, but how do you really feel? I don't see him nearly enough. Well, what do you really feel? And they try and, at least this therapist, right? That was my experience of it, that would like magnify until I got to the point where I'm like, I'm so afraid of my dad. And it's like, not true. And it wasn't true at all, but it was like what she wanted.
Right.
Because we want the drama. And was my experience. So for a lot of things, I think, and I still do, that I don't think as many people need therapy as are doing it. Right. I think people have a tendency to do it for small things, and it kind of dilutes what it's actually good for. Because it is good in certain cases, but a lot of people use it for like silly stuff. Like people say, I have PTSD from Twitter. And it's like, well, you definitely don't. Because like, you know what I mean? Because you can also like uninstall Twitter or turn it off or turn off your phone. Like,
yeah, you can disengage. You can separate. You can move it. It's not a part of you, right? It's not inside and all that kind of stuff. I get what you're saying.
If it's easy to turn it off, it's probably not PTSD, right? Like, if there's a movie that makes me feel a certain way, I just turn it off. There's an actual value in therapy that I didn't discover until actually things happened to me. And then, my understanding as far as PTSD before I went to was that it was like, it's for soldiers who something happens to their friends. Like I have some friends that have that because they were in the military and they're sole survivors from their unit. And sometimes it's a large unit and they're the only one out of like 500 people. Like, there definitely should be something wrong with you. Like, that makes a lot of sense. I think there's been a lot of progression or change in how we perceive, it used to be called shell shock, and then it was like not really seen as real. But now there's like a lot more understanding of it, which is cool, so that soldiers can at least be aware that they have an issue. So that was my understanding. As far as PTSD, that's what I thought it was for. Mm-hmm. And then my understanding of depression was really, I had a lot of depression as a kid. Every like therapist and counselor I talked to, I guess I could just say I thought they were idiots. Like nothing they said helped. all of their advice was really like about sinking into depression, really experiencing it and talking about your feelings. And I found that like, if I just distracted myself or went and did something fun, then that kind of went away from me. But if I like did all the things they suggested, it just got way worse and would turn into a malaise. So I did have some experiences with things, but basically by the time I was out of high school, I didn't have any depression issues. Once I realized that all the advice I was getting was terrible, and I just decided to be proactive. So that's kind of where my disdain for therapists came from, was that all my experiences were either they wanted to hear really extreme things or they just made it worse, right? It's like sometimes the solution is not to keep talking about it. Like you always, in marriage counseling, they're always like, well, what did she do that made you mad? And it's like, you say the things in front of her. Of course, she's going to get more mad now, right? Like that's, you're like talking about it and you're like, oh yeah, I forgot you ever said this one? Like, oh, I forgot I was mad about that. So a lot of counseling, like bringing up an old bad memory and reminding you of how mad you are about it, which is like, well, that's not how I want to live. So going into that was my experience. And then in college, I was at my friend's house and we were all hanging out. And I was talking to this guy, like friend of a friend, if you will. Like we hung out and we knew each other. We weren't really good friends, but we'd spend a lot of time with each other. And because we were in the same circle of like 5 or 6 friends, and we hung out on, it was pretty cool. And it was like, we all went home. He went home to his apartment, which was just across the apartment block. We're in the apartment block where he lived. And he killed himself. Like he went home and hung himself in his closet. That's different. So that's where it's like, I wish he'd said something.
Did you have any signals that something might have
No.
He was really good at hiding it. And that's the thing about depression, PTSD, and everything. We're really good at hiding that.
There was I would have done anything. I would probably, even if I didn't like him, I would have done anything. Because I've been in situations before where friends have like a small issue. I'm like, all right, let's go do something right now. I would have done probably anything if he'd said, I'm thinking about doing this. I'm like, all right, let's go somewhere else. Come stay at my house. The one power that depression or these things have is they convince you that you're alone.
Yep.
It doesn't work
if
you don't think you're the only one. So that's the most important thing, is that every person thinks they're the only one who feels this way. Everyone's like, oh, my depression's different than yours. That belief is what's holding you back, for sure.
It is.
Because it can't work without isolation. Whatever it is, all of these things, a really critical component of it getting bad is isolation.
Okay, so let me ask you that. Now let's go back to before you jump into your next scene here. You mentioned getting to high school, you worked it out on your own. How did you do that, but also promote not isolating?
Oh, sure. So I realized it's really hard to be depressed if you're distracted. So what I do is I made a list of things I love to do that take 100% of my attention. Example, batting cages, golf range, anything range, gun range, anything that takes 100% of your attention. To be depressed, you have to be thinking about it. You have to focus on it, for me. So I developed a couple of policies. One of my policies is, if I'm depressed, I tell the person closest to me as soon as I sense it. So whether it's my friend or someone in my family or someone at school, I will tell someone that I'm not that good of friends. I'm like, hey, I'm feeling really depressed right now. If someone doesn't like you, they will do something that makes you angry instead of depressed. Even if it's someone who doesn't like you, they will do something other than give you depression. They'll say something mean, and then you're like not depressed anymore because now you're mad. So it even works in that crazy situation. And the other thing is that, and then I go, listen, I'm feeling depressed, so I need to do, and then I name something awesome that I'm going to pay for. So I used to have this friend who I would always call him when I was depressed. He was like, Sunday fun day. I'm like, listen, I'm feeling really depressed. So we're going to the arcade, then we're going to the movie, then we're going to the batting cages, and I'm paying for everything. And he loved my depression, right? It meant he was having an amazing day, and it was great because I had money and he didn't. And he was helping me way more than I was helping him. That's how I dealt with it, is by being practical rather than by being medicated or by talking it out. Because I realized, I was like, depression is just a thought. It's just, if you think about it, then it becomes a bigger thought. So if you fill your brain, because I can only think about 5 things at a time. If you do something that requires all 5 of your bandwidths of thinking, then you will forget, and you'll try and go, I know I was depressed earlier, but I can't remember why, which is where you want to be. So that's really been my approach since high school, and it's very consistent. Even now, if I have like a down day, I'll just tell my wife, I'm like, hey, I'm feeling depressed. And I'm like, okay, let's go for a walk on the beach, let's do this or that. The trigger for my depression now, it will be like, I'll have a thought that's like, oh, I'm so alone, which is a crazy thought for me to have because I'm literally never alone.
I agree. Yes.
I've been in the house by myself over the last 5 years, like 3 times. That's how rarely I'm actually alone. So that's why I know it's a crazy thought, because it's not true. It's never true. I haven't left the house by myself. I have 4 kids. I'm always out with my wife or one of the kids, or one of the people who works here comes with me. So rarely do I go out by myself and do any errand. Both my sons were trying to sleep in the room tonight, and I was going to let them stay until right before this call, but I didn't want them to listen to this call for this one. But normally they sleep during my podcast interviews all the time. So like they're on the bed off camera a lot. They just don't happen to be here tonight. They were in the room though an hour ago. So for me to think I'm alone, it's never actually true, because there's always one of the kids wants to spend time with me or do something. One of my kids isn't even in school yet, so she's always here. So I always have someone in the house. As soon as that happens, I have that thought and I go, okay, that's depression, because that's a silly thought, because I'm not alone. It's very hard for that thought to take root, and it's a good sign, because it's a dumb start, and I know that I'm starting like a cycle. So I'll immediately go do something. But the important thing is to have policies, which is number 1, if I start to feel depressed, I tell someone. Because if you tell someone early on, it's much better than waiting like 3 days in. And the other one is that you make a list of things that are awesome, and everyone's list is different. And you just do one of them. Better if it takes anything that takes all of your attention. So like sewing is a really good one if you use a sewing machine, because you have to pay attention or you'll sew into your finger. Like I know that from experience. Like you can't not really pay attention. For some people, movies don't work. For like one of my friends, he can't watch a movie in the theater because he is thinking about all the things he needs to do. So it doesn't work for him. But for me, theater definitely. At home, not so much. A movie at home doesn't really work, but a movie in the theater does. That's why I don't really watch a whole movie at home. And it can be, sometimes I just will play a video game that I like, because I don't play games that much anymore. I'm a busy guy, but it takes 100% of your attention, because now controllers have like 700 buttons. So you can't really be depressed and remember what all the buttons do, at least for me.
Oh no, I'm a gamer too, and it started getting a little crazy. Yeah, I'm with you. I had to let that one go.
So I really look for, do I really like it? And does it take all of my attention?
Okay.
And then telling someone. So getting it out, because it kills the secret, because then it can't use that. Oh, nobody knows, you're all alone. It's like, no, I already told someone. So those are 3 things that really make a difference. And then I also have a policy, like if one of my kids asks me to go swimming, I always say yes, no matter what I'm working on. If I'm on a phone call, it's really important, I go, sorry, I have to go. So that way you make the decision before you're in the moment. And that way it's taken care of, so that you don't have to make the decision while you're depressed. Because when you're depressed, you make bad decisions.
Yeah.
So it kind of breaks all of those cycles. If you're thinking about the big one, then you just call a number like right away. That's a policy you should make, right? And because the thing is, the phone people are very good at what they do. Like they know how to deal with that emergency situation. So there's some situations that you just need someone who's like, that's their specialty. So I've never had to do that, but that's also a policy.
Okay. Sounds good. Thank you. That was a great answer. Great answer to the question. So I didn't want to digress you too much, but thank you. I appreciate it.
Ask away. That's why I'm here.
Yeah. So tell us what happened after, the personal friend passed, and your experience with PTSD, how all of that came about. I really want everyone to hear this story.
Sure.
And give me the gritty. Give it all.
Yeah. I've been in probably 50 or 60 typhoons and hurricanes. A signal 1, a signal 2, a signal 3, like those don't move the needle for me, because I've been in so many of them. So we get a notification there's a typhoon coming. I'm like, oh, it's no big deal. It's a signal 1. About an hour before it hit landfall, it jumps to signal 2. By the time it comes to our house, it's a signal 5, but we don't know, because the last notification we heard was signal 4. That's when all the cell phone signal cuts out. The storm comes in, and you are expecting not a big deal. You're expecting a 1 and you get a 5. That's a pretty big surprise.
Yeah.
It's impossible to describe it unless you see it, but if you've ever been in a real fire and it's so hot you can't run through it, that's what it's like. You look outside and your body won't go through the door. So the wind is going hundreds of miles an hour. You cannot make your body go outside. Your body's like, I don't care. That's death out there. I won't go outside. And the storm only lasts, let's say, 2 or 3 hours. But in that time, we're in our house was 3 stories. First, the roof gets ripped off. Then the third floor gets ripped off. Then the second floor gets ripped off of the house. So we're in the bottom floor. The generator's running, and we're like, maybe we should turn it off because we don't want it to start a fire. But the generator's right outside my window, and it's like none of us can go do it. That's how big the storm is. And then it starts flooding, and we're very far. We thought we were far enough away, and the flood is only 2 inches, but the water's moving at more than 100 miles an hour. So 2 inches is a real big deal when it's going really fast. And you do the whole thing where we life jacket the kids, and because we have all of that stuff because we live near the beach. So we live about 100 meters from the beach, and it's so across the road. The water's coming in. Fortunately, it never went above 2 inches high. And we kind of realized that if we had just had like sandbags and just one layer of sandbags around the front door, that wouldn't have even happened, right? But of course, the problem with flooding is that it's so damaging. So everything smells bad, everything kind of damaged. So the storm ends, and our generator's still working, and it's over, right? You're just like enduring the over. And the next morning you wake up and you realize, okay, the power's out to the entire island. Every single cell phone tower is gone. They're gone. There's nothing there. So there's no power, there's no electricity, there's no source of food or water. We're on an island where you don't grow your own food very much. So because it flooded and the flood water is dirty, every single well is poisoned. So there's no clean water on the whole island. You come out and you look around, and you have a spectrum of how people respond. So a lot of people are like so happy they survived, and you have idiots. Like mostly it's idiots, people who don't realize what's going on, and so they go surfing or they whatever. Those are the ones that they're not going to make it. If they survive, it's 100% luck. There's no thought to them. There's other people that are in cooperative ventures, like sawing through all the trees to make the roads passable again because all the roads are completely blocked off. That's one group of people that are doing cooperative ventures, okay? There's another group of people painting like help signs. They're using hope as their strategy. I fall into the category, I turn to my wife, I go, babe, I think it's on. I say, we got to stockpile right now because we have some cash in the house. Anyone who has water or food, or we're buying it, we buy an extra tank of gas for cooking, we buy an extra gas for the generator, and we stockpile. We don't have a lot of money. As long as nothing goes wrong, we have enough. I said we need to be ready to survive without help for 2 weeks. As we go to the police station, they're all gone. They've left the island. None of them are there. We look at the government office. The mayor's gone. All of the politicians have left. So probably I was one of the first person to realize. I said, okay, there's no law right now. I said, there are no rules, anything. And it's important to understand that that's not a metaphor. Any social norm or any rule you believe in, they're all gone. Okay? First, it's survival of the smartest. So the dumbest people, they're the ones who you see in the movie, they're really idiots who drink when there's the thing going on, and then they hope to survive. And it's yeah. And those people are the first ones who are going to do something, right? So those are the first ones you have to be ready for to come over the fence. So immediately we stockpile our stuff, and then we don't run the generator that much because it's noisy, right? We don't want to draw attention to ourselves. So, we block off the fence so people can't look through the fence at us, and we take a defensive posture. We form an alliance with our next door neighbors. We talked to them about maybe we'll all move to a new location together, having that discussion because they have a secondary location that we might go to, but it's probably damaged. And there's talk that there's going to be a second storm coming in, and then there's no help. There's no boats that come. The Red Cross does not come. It's very important to understand that they will never come. They're monsters, okay? And they always have. Mm-hmm. Anyone who's been through a natural disaster and then experienced the Red Cross knows that every single person that's a part of that organization is a monster. They don't help anyone. I mean, they always steal from the people who need it the most. So just be prepared for that. So there's no help coming, and anyone who does try to help is being blockaded. So you are on your own, and it's just a question of how bad is it going to get. And we didn't have a problem at first, but then I got sick first. So I got dysentery, which will kill you because it was killing me. Maybe the second day, maybe a day and a half in. I don't know exactly when I got it, but I knew I was sick. So you start to lose a lot of weight. So I was losing 1 kilogram a day, I think. Mm-hmm. By the time I got to the hospital, all my clothes would keep falling off. So to give you a sense of it, my clothes would just fall off, and we have food and stuff like that, but like we're just giving the food to the kid. I don't eat. I stopped eating. So only the kids are eating. I'm only eating coconuts, which I don't do anymore. I haven't had one since the incident, so that's for sure. But I'm only eating the meat of coconut, only drinking coconut water. So that the kids don't know. The kids have no idea that I'm starving to death. So that's the first thing. And then you start to look at your neighbors and go, well, we need something they have. And we know they have it and they don't want to share. Not our next door neighbors, but that's how you look at your other neighbors, right? You're not in alliance with, and you go, well, this person who we've been kind to in the past and shown stuff to is being very selfish. So you start to make lists of who's stronger than you and who's weaker than you. Every night we sleep by our gate with knives. I teach my kids how to do it, even though they're young. I'm like, listen, if someone comes over the fence, here's how you do it. Because, I know how to do it. So we have that conversation, and everyone's sleeping like ready to go with machetes and knives every night. No one ever came over the fence. We left after day 5. So we were in 5. We only purged for 5 days. It's a little bit out of order, but every night that's happening. Every night you're getting dirtier. You can't wash. You go into the ocean, all the water's dirty. Everything's poisoned. So there's no clean water. So we all got sick. And the doctor said it's impossible. The doctor goes, oh, you can only get dysentery from drinking bad water. Like, no, we were drinking bottled water. We all got it from bathing.
Yeah.
I was like, Doc, I have it. Okay. We all get sick. I get sick first. By day 3, I know I'm going to die. And then, also, people know you're in trouble and no one comes to help you. Everyone says love can conquer all, because it's not about love. It's hate. So the only thing that kept me going was thinking about the people who knew I was in trouble and wouldn't help me, and thinking about healing them. Like, let's just not dance around it. Like very specific ways you go, well, this person knows I'm in trouble. As a family member, knew I was in trouble and sent no help. And so my wife and every night would cry and go, why doesn't this person help us? And I said, well, if we survive, I'm going to kill him. What people will do when we finally got out and they were like, oh, we didn't know what was wrong, so we didn't know what to do. I was like, here's an idea. If you know someone's in a natural disaster and you don't hear from them, you send help. I said, you have money, you have resources, you didn't send help. So let's just say it was a long journey to forgiveness, okay? That took a lot of therapy because, when hate saved my life, like that's a huge part of it, is that you need enough hate to do what you got to do. You talk about, well, which neighbor has a resource I want. And there's a lot of talk about which neighbor will taste the best, for sure. So if you think nobody ate anyone else, you're wrong. 100%. We didn't because we left on day 5. By day 6, we would have. Me and my wife, no, we were talking about last night. Like, she was like, yeah, definitely. We definitely had agreed on the person because we still know who it was. Okay. I don't know if that person's still alive or not, because we didn't go back to the island. But if I ran into that person, that's the first thing I would think about. Right. Is like, yeah, it was definitely you.
Yeah. Yeah.
One of the things you realize is that there's an animal inside of you, the real you, and it's just below the surface. Anyone who has kids, it's closer to the surface, because once your kid's starving will activate it a little bit faster. My kids weren't starving, only I was, so that's why I didn't flip earlier. I was already ready on day 3. So everyone is your enemy when you're surviving. There's no friends. We had an alliance with our neighbors, but it's not that strong an alliance, okay?
Not that at that time.
If it came down to us or them, right? It's us against the other neighbors, but then at some point it might be us against them, which it didn't happen that far. We got lucky, but absolutely we were ready to do all of these things. We were ready to do whatever it takes to survive. Remember, nothing is illegal. When you're surviving, there is no law. The police left, which is their way of saying, do whatever you got to do. And I said, okay, message received. So, you're just in that phase where no help is coming, and you just keep thinking that help will come. And people also, you have to understand that politicians are so much worse than you think. Like these people running for president would fly in a helicopter, take a couple of photos, and then fly out. But they would leave, they wouldn't even bring people they need to go to the hospital with. Nobody died during the storm. Everyone died after the storm. It's hard to know how many people, because even after civilization came back, a lot of people died because they couldn't come to terms with what they did during the emergency. So they never got over it. Okay. So that kind of stuff happened.
Yeah.
So yeah, we were ready to do anything. There's nothing you could ask if you would have done this that I wouldn't do. There's no thing you can say, oh, would you do this to save your kids? And the answer is yes, or whatever you would ask. The real question is, who's going to flip first? It's not a question of if people are going to start killing and eating each other, because they are. It's only a question of who realizes it first. So we got lucky that I realized that no help was coming first. Like within 3 hours, nobody would sell us a bottle of water. Every store was like, we're not selling anything, we're closed. We got lucky enough that we figured it out. We bought like everything we could get our hands on fast enough before everyone else realized what we were doing, right? People were trying to copy us later on, but they were late, and I don't know what happened to them, and I don't care. I've never looked up to see who made it and who didn't. It doesn't matter to me. They don't mean anything to me. You change who you are, you become a survival mode. My wife is a much better survivor than me, so we switched roles. She was in charge of the family, made all of our decision making during this time, because she's much, much more savage than me. Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, what do you want to know next?
So now, this point is where I want to talk about the aftermath, like the residue. You kind of went through apathy, right? So now you've done that. What else happened for you to recover, right? Because you mentioned, all those nobody believes yous, that they're
and so on and
so forth.
There's a couple of things that happen. First of all, once you accept that you're going to die, you enter a small community. Number one, I'm a member of a Signal 5 survivor. Very, very small number of people are in that group. Like especially in like houses where the house is not made out of roof, right? Like where the roof is made out of straw. I'm also a member of a small community of people that have prayed for death and then didn't die. It's probably 1,000 of us in the world. It's a very, very small community. So we don't have meetings. And I got my prayer was answered. I said, God, just kill me before the kids. So only because of my wife do we escape. She gets us to the hospital, just like very close to a miracle. I have 12 hours to live and my kids all have 24 to 36. So even at the hospital, my prayer was still answered. Like it was still, because I don't want to watch my kids die. I want to just let me die first, which is, I guess, very selfish, but it is what it is.
It's very honest. I would pray for the same thing.
Yeah. So, and then when my wife was like, I found a way off the island, I got money from a loan shark to pay that coyote to get us off the island to a hospital. And I was like, just take the kids. I said, leave me. I talked about this last night and she was like, yeah, I still need you. So she's the reason I left. I was like, just dig a hole or leave me here. It's okay. She didn't accept that. And also people in the hospital like have no understanding. So they know you're sick, but like, they don't really get it. That's why also like, I don't do like where I spend time with other people from the event. Like, I don't want to be in that type of community. I know that's one approach to it. Like, oh, we were through the same thing. I don't want that. So the first thing is that my wife and I have a completely different experience. It's completely different. Her description and my description are very different. That's part of it, is that you have to accept the first thing is that everyone remembers it differently, and that's okay. Like so I had to accept her memory is completely different, and also you're in a situation where like I'm trapped. My wife saved my life. That means I can never divorce her. Like I'm trapped, like it's a thing. You have an obligation, not that I wanted to, but it changes the dynamic, right? It creates a huge dynamic within the relationship that you have to talk about, because I'm not alive because of me. I didn't survive. I wasn't the strong one. My wife was. Listen, sometimes you don't know why you're married to a person until it gets bad.
Yeah.
Something bad is going to happen to everyone. You just don't know what it's going to be. And if you're listening and going, well, nothing's ever bad happened to me, that just means it's in front of you, not behind you. So that's worse. Yeah, so then it was really hard for us to get off the island. The airlines were making up fake rules saying you can't travel and you have to do this and that for your kids. So we had a lot of problems. It was really hard. That actually caused more trauma at the airports than the other parts, because like we just wanted to get somewhere safe. So a lot of places were devastated. So we had to find a new place to live very far away. So we live like thousands of miles away from the last place. Found a place that was like the right fit. It was just very, very, very hard. But when you want to save your kids, you'll do whatever it takes. We finally get to our new place, and kind of that's the island we live on now, and it's been a good situation. But then like our house had like crazy metal shutters. That's why we picked it. Is like, this will stop every time it rains at night. You're always closing the metal shutters, and every time it rains or there's lightning, you have like, or wind, you have like things. My wife and I have different weather-based triggers. And then what happened? I was interviewing someone for my podcast, and they mentioned something about therapy or something like that. And I was like, yeah, maybe I should do that. I was like, maybe this one, because, I have a disdain for most therapy. I was like, maybe this is like a real one. And it kind of, because it's like a specific thing. I was like, but there's nothing wrong with me because I don't have PTSD because it wasn't, I'm not in the military. Like,
right. You're still going on that misconception piece. Yeah.
So I do this online, one of the online therapies, where you like, they match you with someone and the guy pops up and I go, uh-oh. I did. And I thought he was an idiot and he had like drawings behind him on the wall. First of all, I talked about my stuff and he goes, oh, you have natural disaster PTSD. I work with tons of people with that. Just knowing that you have a thing that's real, it gives you because then you can get better from it. So first thing is naming and understanding what's wrong with you, like was a huge game changer for me because I had never heard of those words before. And part of it is that my kids have zero memories. They don't have any negative memories about it. We did such a good job that they have no trauma from it, which is like really shocking. And then, he was like, wow, that's amazing. He's like, the fact that you did that, he's like, you won. And so he said cool stuff like that. I did about 9 months with him. Once a week, I did a session once, and it would give me a lot of homework, and we would work through stuff. And everything he did, I thought was weird. All of the homework, all of the exercises, all of the sessions, every single time, I was like, I don't know why we're doing this, but it worked. Like the turnaround is that he was amazing at what he does.
Yeah.
A good doctor knows really fast what's wrong with you. And then they know how to deal with it. And that's what he was one of those. And he did an amazing job. We would work through like, what are the things that are triggers? What are not? Everyone gets it different. My wife and I would be bothered by different things. Yeah. Like I never had nightmares. Like, I didn't have the nightmare one very much. Like you think that's part of it, but that's the problem is that once you think, oh, this is the symptoms, you don't get all of the symptoms. You just get some of them. And you do things that are weird. Most people, when they're looking at a place to live, don't have a really long conversation about floodlines. A lot of that stuff is something we're very aware of. The first thing is you have to be honest about what's wrong with you. So everyone has different symptoms. So it's always going to be different. There's like 20 different symptoms and I had like 6 of them. Some people have all 20. Some people have different ones. Like I never had anger. I had deep apathy. Like I have no fear of death. My wife and I have had a long conversation. Like we might be in a final destination situation, which is that like we were meant to die and something weird will come kill us, like exploding computer or jackknife truck. Everything's in black and white. So you don't care about stuff. So there was a lot of that. And when you talk to people, because people are voyeurs, they're like, oh, what was it like? And people will say things like, oh, I would never eat another person. And all I can think is like, well, if something happens, I'm coming to your house first. Mm-hmm. Like, that's what I really think. I think about that. And like, there's this thing, most people are like, oh, if you make me mad enough, the dog wakes up inside of me. And for me, it's the exact opposite. It's like the devil's always looking for a chance to get out. And I have to hold it back. People look at me and they think I'm civilized. It's like, or that like, I'm a nice guy and like, wrong. Like and it's inside of everyone. I'm not special. Everyone has this inside of them. It just takes a certain situation to get it out. And it's usually 48 hours. I think most people have 2 to 3 days of food. So most people within 48 hours of a natural disaster, if FEMA doesn't show up, if food doesn't show up, it's on. It's the purge. That's a very accurate description of what happens when there's no law. Mm-hmm. You just have to accept that what you actually are, which is not as civilized as we pretend. There's a survivor inside of you, or I guess you just don't survive. But
yeah,
those are the things. But you have, for me, so I went through the therapy and kind of talked about these are my triggers, these are not my triggers. Because at first you're like upset that you don't have all of them. Like, oh, why don't I have anger? Why don't I have nightmares? Why does it wind bother me but rain doesn't? How about that? Like, but that's because it's the rain wasn't really the problem. The main problem was the wind. Who am I mad at? All of these things. So you work through that. And the cool thing with my therapist was like, when I told about the person who never sent help, he's like, well, do you want to make amends with them? And I was like, oh my God, that's so cool. I thought you were going to force me. Like, I love that. Like, you know what I mean? That one. I was like, it's like, only if you want to. And that person went through a medical thing. So I was like, oh, okay. God did it for me. If you know that it has a name, then you can never admit you have it. there's a lot of people that, like, when you get back to civilization, want to erase what happened. You don't want to talk about it. You want to hide what happened, but then it has power because secrets have power over you. That less like loneliness has power. So like, you know, I don't want to be here right now. I'm not having a good time. Like if someone thinks, oh, John's having a blast, wrong. I hate being here. I'm not here for me. I'm here because if someone else hears my story and can then not do something to themselves, then that's why I'm here. Not because I like talking about the story. I hate talking about the story. People never believe me. Unless you've been there too, you don't think it's real. You go, oh, that would never happen. Or like, that's a movie. It's not a true story, that kind of stuff. It did. And so you have to accept it, and it becomes a part of who you are. It changes your personality in different ways. If you want to get better, you have to do uncomfortable things. I have to talk to my wife about things. Sometimes we had to talk about it. And yeah, she was like, for a long time, she was like, we weren't going to do anything to any of our neighbors. And I was like, maybe she remembers it differently. But then last night we talked about it, and she was like, yeah, okay, we were. So that's how she dealt with it. Like, we deal with it in different ways. You're not going to get better at the same rate. You're not going to have the same symptoms. You're not going to get better in the same way. You know, she had her own therapist with a completely different strategy, which is fine. Also, like, I don't know what she did with her, because I never asked, and she didn't ask about me and mine. Like, that's another thing. Like, I don't care about the process. I just care about the result. You can't bury it. It's too big. I always think about, if something happens again, what will we do here? We always strategize for that, plan for that. We have a lot of plans in place and all of those things.
Okay.
So it's like, but you have these thoughts, and you just have to be okay with it and realize that, like, it's who you are, and it's not as big of a deal because no one cares, because no one believes you. It's like an interesting place to be. Like, probably if everyone I know watched this video, they just wouldn't believe me. They'd be like, oh, he's just like doing like he did in high school to impress his therapist. I'm like, okay. So it's freeing in a very strange way. There's people who are there understand, but I don't hang out with people who are there. Like, I don't want to constantly relive it, because then you'll just have it come back. Like, whenever my wife is like, oh, do you want to go live back there? Like, no.
Yeah.
Don't want to live in that city. And she doesn't want to go back to live in the house where she watched her whole family almost die. She's the only one who wasn't dying when we got to the hospital, which is also like, it's awful in its own way.
Okay.
Yeah. So you have some questions? Fire away.
Yeah. Well, I guess I have just some, before we get to your golden nuggets here, I have some reflections that I wanted to kind of just throw at you. The first one, I have an ex-friend of mine who I tried to vent to. It was interesting because she didn't pass the test, if that makes sense. Because the moment that I started venting, she immediately went to judging me. And at that point, it was, okay, you lack the empathy, the compassion, just to listen first. And so when you said that before, that you have to talk to people, you have to let them know that you're having a bad day, this is what I need from you. And I appreciate you saying that. But also, to give to the folks, recognize the people that you can do that with and who you can't, and move them and shift them around in your life. The second, I know your story is really going to hit home with a lot of folks. I personally know people who have gone through storm and the abandonment from those that were supposed to be there, and then went through it again, such as Harvey and other natural disasters. What's interesting, though, about your story is I married my husband as you are now, and we were 25. And he was like, it would be day one for us. And when I shared this with him, and I said, well, he's forever changed. I mean, I said, but I think you don't tell me. I said, the difference, though, is that he talks to his wife. They talk about these things. And I don't think that you don't speak to me in as great detail, because you might think you're going to freak me out because of what's inside you, of what you're willing to do. But you don't know that I know you as that person already. I married you knowing that.
I think
Yeah.
I think it's important to know. I think that women will do worse things to save their kids than men will.
I agree. That's what I'm saying.
Because like my wife would definitely do worse stuff than me faster, like for sure. And I don't think that makes her unique. I don't think that makes her special. I think that it's more common. So I think it's interesting. And then as far as your friends, like that's, yeah, it's like one thing to say I'm depressed. It's another thing to say like, here's the things I was thinking of doing or would do. And my first thought when someone is like judging me, I'm like, oh, you won't be there day 2. So that's my first thought when your friends like my judgment. I'm like, oh, that's not a survivor. That's someone who's like, they're the people who are like, oh no, I have complete and total faith in the government and whatever it is. There's this belief that you're going to say something that's so shocking. I mean, what can you say that's worse than what I've talked about, right? Like,
trust me, it for certain people who haven't gone through certain things or who think that they have all the answers or want to be the influential person and have an idea of, oh, I've been through a hard time in my marriage, or I've been through this, I've been through that, so I can tell you these things. They just become judgmental because of thinking that they can handle it.
Yeah, it just sounds like a dummy to me. Like, I just like,
we're no longer friends.
Yeah, it sounds like it's good to, I'd rather find out early on that someone's not right to be in my life.
Yeah. So. And then the last one, and this is not part of some kind of agenda or anything. I am obviously of a specific demographic, Black, and I found it incredibly, like your story, incredibly relatable because this is how being Black in America feels. Like nobody believes you. There is no nice way to explain it because, as you said, it's savage, it's cruel, and when you speak to a Black person, no matter what, there is a certain level of apathy that we have, and it's always interpreted as angry, frustrated, mean, and all the wrong words. And I'm just generalizing because I know this is through my many connections with my community. So if this doesn't apply to you, so be it. And I also know that other demographics feel the same way, but that's for them to speak on their behalf. I don't tell my kids fairy tales because from the day they came out of me, I knew the world I was bringing them into. And I had only a short time to be in that bliss with them before I had to go into prep mode for them to prepare them for survival. And my parents did it to me, and theirs did it to them, and that's because of the oppression, the mistreatment, the butchery, and that's all putting it lightly, of the generations before me. And we all knew that we had to make our kids resilient because in the midst of that, we lost sight of love. Because I feel my parents are proud of me because I made it through all my traumas so far. I am the woman that they raised me to be, but I don't know if that translates to love. And so I think it's important that in that preparation and all of that kind of stuff, that we also generate that love. And I like that policy, like what you mentioned. Like if my kids come first, if they ask me for something, I give it to them, because through that preparation and what you did to with them, they also see I was preparing you for what needed to happen, but I also love you in the midst of all this anyway. And it seems like that came through very well. And so I applaud you for that. And that's a great message to send out to the folks who are raising our kids for the kind of prejudices and mistreatments that are yet to come. It's just like you said, if it hasn't happened, it's coming. I thank you for that. But Jonathan, are you ready to give us your golden nuggets and add that ketchup just to recap?
The biggest one is that bad things are going to happen and you're going to find out that you're capable of more than you know. We all think, oh, I can only handle this situation, but you can handle way, way, way more than you think. That's the most important one. Number 2 is that sometimes you got to do things that you didn't think you were going to have to do in order to survive. And number 3 is that when it ends, you have to go back to civilization, and it's always going to be a weird transition. And some people understand and some people won't, but you can't keep it inside. You got to get it out somehow, because otherwise it has power over you forever. So you got to break through that. Those are the 3 critical things.
Thank you. And I want to share something with the listeners before we close. I appreciate you coming forward and sharing the story, There are a lot of men with misconceptions of trauma and therapy. It's the heavy stories that make the connection, and I appreciate you for sharing this with my audience. As you said before, only the strong survive. And you did, and you are. But that's the episode today. I'm sure many of you can relate to Jonathan's experience in your own way. Have you recognized the savage in you? Perhaps his story perfectly describes your personal feelings. I know it has for me. Think you can withstand the storm? Even if you feel you have the preparation and plan, they are all just theories until it's time to put them into practice. Nothing prepares you for the mental and emotional toll a natural disaster takes on you, or shall I say, takes from you. But if you feel you got it covered, I'd still want to hear all about it. I love it all, and so will someone else. So before I let you go, Jonathan, why don't you go ahead and remind the people who you are and where they can find your resources or reach out to you.
Yeah, sure. You can visit my website, Serve to Master. I've written 2 books about my approach to dealing with depression. You can kind of see what I'm doing there on my blog and kind of how I'm building an online business, how I still... Everyone's like, oh, you're going to come back to America? I'm like, no, I'm still going to live on an island here. Like, I'm not moving. Just a small part of it. So that's where you can find me.
Awesome. I'll make sure to include all of Jonathan's resources and connections in the episode description, as well on my website resources page, movingwithmeaning.com. Make sure you guys subscribe to the show, Moving with Meaning, the podcast, and tap that alert bell so you know when these episodes drop. I am on Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, and Spotify. If I get enough downloads and follows, I might be inspired to drop a few episodes in a single week. So please share, like, repost, and follow. Tag someone. We are creating a community here. Quick housekeeping before you go. Follow me on Instagram at movingwithmeaning82 and my Facebook page, Moving with Meaning. Also connect with me on LinkedIn. I do dabble a bit in TikTok at Crystal B. Clark. Links are in the episode. Alrighty. I'm Crystal on Moving with Meaning, the podcast, reminding you to take it one step at a time. All moves have meaning. Check y'all later.